Search or enter website name. Image.
Welcome
Actions
to
available.
Understanding...
An orange background with nothing else.
Welcome to Understanding the IPCC number 8. Working Group 3, Mitigation of Climate Change, Part B.
Image. Actions available.
This is who we
No
are.
description available.
Understanding the IPCC meetup, started by me.
Carl Sagan. Heading Level 1.
Normally
Main.
at this point,
Landmark.
I describe Carl Sagan, his existence as a god among men, and other stuff, but since this is the second of a 4-part series for the one presentation, I'm going to abbreviate the introduction a great deal, including you're not seeing me. I know you'll survive. The microphone and the camera seem to be messing up. So in any event, this is Carl Sagan. His concept of science being useful to the general public is very important to how I'm approaching what I'm doing. So these links are all in the notes. This should be
Open survey. Help us improve this in our upcoming web. Open survey. Participate in a survey. Times.
what?
Calendar. Link. AR5 Climate Change 2014. Mitigation of Climate Change. Heading Level 1.
There we go. This is where the information you're about to listen to comes from, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change website. You've probably heard this information many times. This is the report, Working Group 3, Mitigation of Climate Change. All the information comes from here. Links again in the comments, and this is where they are.
403. A talking game YouTube channel.
So
Visited.
this is us,
Link.
a talking game. My name's Kerry Rutherford.
Actions
See, I never said my
available.
name. Kerry Rutherford. And this is my... Oh, be quiet. This is my presentation business, a talking game. There's information on this site, obviously. You can contact me.
Barefoot Freelance. A talk. 40. A talking game at Barefoot Freelance.
There's the email
Car.
address.
4. Barefoot Freelance website. Music Alive. A talking game YouTube channel.
There's a YouTube
Visited.
channel with
Link.
these videos on it, and
Actions available.
it's very important right now that I mention. If you haven't seen any of these videos before, unless you're already working in climate science, I strongly recommend that you turn off this video and go see one of these other videos.
Action menu. 7 months ago. Bullet. 30 views. Indigenous whiteness.
No.
3rd bullet. 7 months ago. Action menu. Indigenous white. 7 bullet. 7 months. Action menu. Introduction from Indigenous white.
Oh.
7 views. Bullet. 8 months ago. Action menu. Who they are.
There.
Number 1. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and their 2018 synthesis report by a talking game 8 months ago. 1 hour. 7 minutes 61
So that's
views.
part 1.
Heading
There's
Level
also
3. Link. 60. Bullet. 8 months ago. Action menu. What they say.
Part
Number
2.
2. The IPCC's Working Group 1.
Same idea.
On the physical science basis of their report.
All right.
Action menu. Button.
So these videos are on YouTube, again linked in the comments. If you're not familiar with this work, you should watch those two first, because there's all kinds of stuff that gets explained. There's foundational stuff about the IPCC. There's an explanation of why you're listening to my iPad talk to you, and stuff like that. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. This is part 8, which is the second part of the Working Group 3 report. So all those, you can follow all of them through if you like. You can jump around as you wish, of course, because it's a free planet.
Black_beauty. Image. Article. Landmark. App switcher. Black_beauty. Black_dog. Setting. Files. Safari. Setting. Mail. Safari. TyrrellMuseum.com and 3 other tabs. Active. Dog. Mail. Settings.
That's not good. I guess I'll have to open up books from here.
WR Castle folder. Adobe Digital Edition. Books. Books. Page 1 of 1.
Hopefully.
Chapter 3 Social, Economic, Chapter 12 Human Settlements,
Yes.
Infrastructure
So what I've done,
and Spatial Planning, Part minus 40 pages, 8, 15/page, 15 chapters, 4 parts.
this is an index to this report. Because there's 17 chapters, I believe, I work through, or 16, I think 16 chapters I work through, and they're distributed over 4 different parts. So I've created an index so that you can either take a screenshot of this index if you're watching this or reading this stuff, and this will allow you to jump around within the reports. For example, you'll see it says 40 pages, 8.25 minutes per page, 15 chapters. That means that it takes 8.25 minutes for my voiceover technology to read each page. So if we're and then today we're doing part B, which is chapter 11, 4, 10, and 5, I think. So if we're in there and if the pages are listed, so if you're in chapter 11 and you think, well, I want to see the thing about drivers, you can do a little math with the pages are listed for each chapter, and you can do some math and skip ahead, whatever it is, 24 minutes or something. When I'm finished this report, I will input the starting points of all the chapters in the notes, but that won't be happening until I've finished the recording, because I won't know until I'm done. So also, because as I've said previously, there's 2 parts here. One is usability, which is why there's an index, and accessibility, because I'm legally blind and others are as well. Or you may be listening to this on a podcast and you may not be able to see this at all. So I'm going to run through the text of this index with the voiceover text so that person listening can hear it. As I said, if you're watching this, you can take a screenshot and keep that around, or if you're listening, maybe pause it after, or maybe make notes as we're going through.
AR5 Climate Change 2014, Mitigation of Climate Change. The Working Group 3 Contribution to the IPCC's 5th Assessment Report, AR5, assesses literature on the scientific, technological, environmental, economic and social aspects of mitigation of climate change since 2007, when the 4th Assessment Report, AR4, was released. Minus 40 pages, 8, 15/page, 15 chapters, 4 parts. Part A 9 PGS. Chapter 2 Integrated Risk and Uncertainty Assessment of Climate Change Response Policies 3 PGS. Chapter 12 Human Settlements, Infrastructure and Spatial Planning 3 PGS. Chapter 3 Social, Economic and Ethical Concepts and Methods 3 PGS. Part B 9 PGS. Chapter 11 Agriculture, Forestry and Other Land Use, AFOLU, 2 PGS. Chapter 4 Sustainable Development and Equity 2 PGS. Chapter 10 Industry 2 PGS. Chapter 5 Drivers, Trends and Mitigation 3 PGS. Part C 12 PGS. Chapter 9 Buildings 3 PGS. Chapter 6 Assessing Transformation Pathways 3 PGS. Chapter 8 Transport 3 PGS. Chapter 13 International Cooperation, Agreements and Instruments 3 PGS. Part D 10 PGS. Chapter 7 Energy Systems 3 PGS. Chapter 14 Regional Development and Cooperation 3 PGS. Chapter 15 National and Subnational Policies and Institutions 3 PGS. Chapter 16 Cross-Cutting Investment and Finance Issues 1 PGS.
Okie dokie, let's go.
App Switcher.
Oh, that's
Books.
not what I want.
Doc. Setting. Books. Active. Books.
You want to
Book.
stay in books.
Assesses. Book. Library.
I need
Button.
to
Library.
get a different
Back
book.
button. Action. New. Index. SPM Summary. TS Tech. New. Front Matter. Unknown. Annex I Glossary. Page 3. 10 Industry. 11 Agriculture.
There we are.
Toolbar.
Now,
Page 6
something
of
else I've done
112.
in this report.
App Switcher. books,
is...
active, Safari, book, dog, mail,
Wow, I'm just
books,
slipping here. I
active,
didn't open files either. Sorry.
action, the weather can, dog, files,
It's because this is my second attempt at
files,
this. That's why.
WGII mitigation, figure underscore 2.4, image, figure underscore 3. Figure underscore 8.30. Figure underscore 10.20. Figure underscore 11.2. Figure underscore
So I'm
done.
incorporating
Button.
images, which is a challenge for someone who can't see. But since these are attached to individual chapters, I of course can assume that the images will be related to what you're listening to.
Figure underscore 11.1. A photo containing a diagram. Possible text. Land.
Wow, possible text, land. But that's literally all I get from this. So hopefully this is beneficial to you. This chapter
Done. List. Button.
has 6
Figure
images.
underscore 3 point. Rows 12 to rows 20. Figure underscore 8.13. PNG. Rows 30. Figure underscore 11.2. PNG image 3.
So I'm going to start
Done.
off even before
Button.
you hear the chapter.
Figure underscore 11.2. A screenshot of a multicolored bar graph.
Ooh, multicolored bar graph. You're so blessed. Okay.
App switcher. Safari. Books. Active. Books.
Okay.
Books.
Let's give it a go.
Page.
And
6
I
of
always,
112. Agriculture. 11.
include
11. Executive sum.
any
11.
hints to where the information is coming from, because if someone is listening to this without benefit of seeing it, it's very easy to get lost in where you are after a couple pages. So
Bookmark. 11.
chapter 11,
Executives. Agriculture.
agriculture,
Forestry. And other land
forestry,
use.
and
A
other land
follow
use.
is unique among the sectors considered in this volume. Since agriculture, forestry, and other land use, a follow is unique among the sectors considered in this volume, since the mitigation potential is derived from both an enhancement of removals of greenhouse gases, GHG, as well as reduction of emissions through management of land and livestock, robust evidence, high agreement. The land provides food that feeds the Earth's human population of 7 billion, for a variety of purposes, livelihoods for billions of people worldwide, and is a critical resource for sustainable development in many regions. Agriculture is frequently central to the livelihoods of many social groups, especially in developing countries where it often accounts for a significant share of production. In addition to food and fiber, the land provides a multitude of ecosystem services. Climate change mitigation is just one of many that are vital to human well-being. Robust evidence, high agreement. Mitigation options in the AFOLU sector, therefore, need to be assessed, as far as possible, for their potential impact on all other services provided by land. Section 11.1. The AFOLU sector is responsible for just under 10-12 gigaton CO2 equivalent/yaw of anthropogenic GHG emissions, mainly from deforestation and agricultural emissions from livestock, soil and nutrient management. Robust evidence, high agreement, 11.2. Anthropogenic forest degradation and biomass burning, forest fires and agricultural burning, also represent relevant contributions. Annual GHG emissions from agricultural production in 2000 to 2010 were estimated at 5.0 to 5.8 gigaton CO2 equivalent/yaw, while annual GHG flux from land use and land use change activities accounted for approximately 4.3 to 5.5 gigaton CO2 equivalent/yaw. Leveraging the mitigation potential in the sector is extremely important in meeting emission reduction targets. Robust evidence, high agreement. 11.9. Since publication of the IPCC Fourth Assessment Report, AR4, emissions from the AFOLU sector have remained similar, but the share of anthropogenic emissions has decreased to 24% in 2010, largely due to increases in emissions in the energy sector. Robust evidence, high agreement. In spite of a large range across global forestry and other land use, FOLU, flux estimates, most approaches indicate a decline in FOLU carbon dioxide, CO2, emissions over the most recent years, largely due to decreasing deforestation rates and increased deforestation. Limited evidence, medium agreement. As in AR4, most projections suggest declining annual net CO2 emissions in the long run. In part, this is driven by technological change, as well as projected declining rates of agriculture area expansion, which, in turn, is related to the expected slowing in population growth. However, unlike AR4, none of the more recent scenarios projects growth in the near term. 11.9. Opportunities for mitigation include supply-side and demand-side options. On the supply side, emissions from land use change, LUC, land management and livestock management can be reduced. Terrestrial carbon stocks can be increased by sequestration in soils and biomass, and emissions from energy production can be saved through the substitution of fossil fuels by biomass. Robust evidence, high agreement. 11.3. On the demand side, GHG emissions could be mitigated by reducing losses and wastes of food, changes in diet and changes in wood consumption. Robust evidence, high agreement. 11.4. Though quantitative estimates of the potential are few and highly uncertain. Increasing production without a commensurate increase in emissions also reduces emission intensity, i.e., the GHG emissions per unit of product that could be delivered through sustainable intensification. Another mechanism for mitigation explored in more detail here than in AR4. Supply-side options depend on the efficacy of land and livestock management. Medium evidence, high agreement. 11.6. Considering demand-side options, changes in human diet can have a significant impact on GHG emissions from the food production life cycle. Medium evidence, medium agreement. 11.4. There are considerably different challenges involved in delivering demand-side and supply-side options, which also have very different synergies and trade-offs. The nature of the sector means that there are potentially many barriers to implementation of available mitigation options, including accessibility to affordable financing, poverty, institutional, ecological, technological development, diffusion and transfer barriers. Medium evidence, medium agreement. 11.7, 11.8. Similarly, there are important feedbacks to adaptation, conservation of natural resources, such as water and terrestrial and aquatic biodiversity. Robust evidence, high agreement. 11.5, 11.8. There can be competition between different land uses if alternative options to use available land are mutually exclusive, but there are also potential synergies, e.g., integrated systems or multifunctionality at landscape scale. Medium evidence, high agreement. 11.4. Recent frameworks, such as those for assessing environmental or ecosystem services, provide one mechanism for valuing the multiple synergies and trade-offs that may arise from mitigation actions. Medium evidence, medium agreement. 11.1. Sustainable management of agriculture, forests, and other land is an underpinning requirement of sustainable development. Robust evidence, high agreement. 11.4. Affordable emissions could change substantially in transformation pathways, with significant mitigation potential from agriculture, forestry, and bioenergy mitigation measures. Medium evidence, high agreement. Recent multimodal comparisons of idealized implementation transformation scenarios find land emissions, nitrous oxide, N2O, methane, CH4, CO2, changing by 4 to 99% through 2030, and 7 to 76% through 2100, with the potential for increased emissions from land carbon stocks. Land-related mitigation, including bioenergy, could contribute 20 to 60% of total cumulative abatement to 2030, and 15 to 40% to 2100. However, policy coordination and implementation issues are challenges to realizing this potential. 11.9. Large-scale biomass supply for energy, or carbon sequestration in the affordable sector provide flexibility for the development of mitigation technologies in the energy supply and energy end-use sectors. As many technologies already exist and some of them are commercial. Limited evidence, medium agreement. 11.3, but there are potential implications for biodiversity, food security, and other services provided by land. Medium evidence, high agriculture, Forestry and Other Land Use, Afolu. Chapter 11. 816. Chapter 11. Agriculture, Forestry and Other Land Use, Afolu. Agreement, Agreement, 11.7. Implementation challenges, including institutional barriers and inertia related to governance issues, make the costs and net emission reduction potential of near-term mitigation uncertain. In mitigation scenarios with idealized comprehensive climate policies, agriculture, forestry, and bioenergy contribute substantially to the reduction of global CO2, CH4, and N2O emissions, and to the energy system, thereby reducing policy costs. Medium evidence, high agreement, 11.9. More realistic partial and delayed policies for global land mitigation have potentially significant spatial and temporal leakage and economic implications, but could still be cost-effectively deployed. Limited evidence, limited agreement, 11.9.
Okay, I will point out at the bottom of each page, not that you hear it all the time, but it mentioned 800 and some, and yes, that's the page number in the report, because we're on page 11, chapter 11, and it's about 17 chapters, so we're about halfway, and it's about a 1,400 page report, just in case you're keeping track of these things.
App switcher, Safari, files, figure files, done, figure done, button, list, figure _ 11.2, list, button. Figure _ 3, rows 12 to rows 20, figure _ 8.13, rows 30, figure _ 11.1, figure _ 11.2, figure _ 11.3, PNG, done, button.
There are 6 images in this collection. I'll point out that given where we are in the report, we're about 15-20 minutes into this particular presentation. You might want to, I recommend that you pause the video, go for, grab a cookie. Same stuff I always say, grab a cookie, a coffee, a beer, a smoke, some air, run around the room twice, whatever helps you deal with this kind of ongoing, lengthy, textual diatribe? You could call it a diatribe if you want.
Done. List. Figure _ 11.3.
Oh,
list. Button. Figure _ 3.2. Rows 12. Rows 30. Figure _ 11.1. Figure _ 11.22. PNG image 1. Done. Button.
Yes, I know I jumped from 3 to 22.
Figure _ 11.22. A screenshot of a graph with text and numbers.
Oh, look at that, text and numbers. I'm not going to show you, there's like this. There was 25 graphics in this collection. I'm not going to show you 25 graphics, at least not between every page. So when there's more than 24, I choose 6, the first 3 and the last 3. Anyways, maximum of 6, minimum of 3 in
App switcher, Safari,
what you'd be seeing.
Tyrell, books, active, books, agreement, 11, economic mitigation potential of supply-side measures in the Afolu sector is estimated to be 718 to 1060, full range, 049-1060, gigaton CO2 equivalent/year in 2030 for mitigation efforts consistent with carbon prices up to $100/TCO2 about a third of which can be achieved at less than $20/TCO2 Medium evidence, medium agreement, 11.6. These estimates are based on studies that cover both forestry and agriculture and that include agricultural soil carbon sequestration. Estimates from agricultural sector-only studies ranged from 0.3 to 4.6 gigaton CO2 equivalent/year at prices up to $100/TCO2 and estimates from forestry sector. Only studies from 0.2 to 13.8 gigaton CO2 equivalent/year at prices up to $100/TCO2 Medium evidence, medium agreement, 11.6. The large range in the estimates arises due to widely different collections of options considered in each study, and because not all GHGs are considered in all of the studies. The composition of the agricultural mitigation portfolio varies with the carbon price, with The restoration of organic soils having the greatest potential at higher carbon prices, $100/TCO2 ec, and cropland and grazing land management at lower, $20/TCO2 ec. In forestry there is less difference between measures at different carbon prices, but there are significant differences between regions, with reduced deforestation dominating the forestry mitigation potential in Latin America and Caribbean, LAM, and Middle East and Africa, MAF, but very little potential in the member countries of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development OECD 1990, and economies in transition EAT. Forest management, followed by afforestation, dominate in OECD 1990, EAT, and Asia, medium evidence, strong agreement, 11.6. Among demand-side measures, which are under-researched compared to supply-side measures, changes in diet and reductions of losses in the food supply chain can have a significant, but uncertain, potential to reduce GHG emissions from food production. 0.76-8.55 gigaton CO2 equivalent/year by 2050, with the range being determined by assumptions about how the freed land is used. Limited evidence, medium agreement, 11.4. More research into demand-side mitigation options is merited. There are significant regional differences in terms of mitigation potential, costs, and applicability, due to differing local biophysical, socio-economic, and cultural circumstances, for instance between developed and developing regions, and among developing regions. Medium evidence, high agreement, 11.6. The size and regional distribution of future mitigation potential is difficult to estimate accurately because it depends on a number of inherently uncertain factors. Critical factors include population, growth, economic and technological developments, changes in behavior over time, depending on cultural and normative backgrounds, market structures and incentives, and how these translate into demand for food, fiber, fodder and fuel, as well as development in the agriculture, aquaculture and forestry sectors. Other factors important to mitigation potential are potential climate change impacts on carbon stocks in soils and forests, including their adaptive capacity. Medium evidence, high agreement, 11.5, considerations set by biodiversity and nature conservation requirements, and interrelations with land degradation and water scarcity. Robust evidence, high agreement, 11.8. Bioenergy can play a critical role for mitigation, but there are issues to consider, such as the sustainability of practices and the efficiency of bioenergy systems. Robust evidence, medium agreement, 11.4.4, box 11.5, 11.13.6, 11.13.7. Barriers to large-scale deployment of bioenergy include concerns about GHG emissions from land, food security, water resources, biodiversity conservation and livelihoods. The scientific debate about the overall climate impact related to land use competition effects of specific bioenergy pathways remains unresolved. Robust evidence, high agreement, 11.4.4, 11.13. Bioenergy technologies are diverse and span a wide range of options and technology pathways. Evidence suggests that options with low life cycle emissions, e.g., sugarcane, miscanthus, fast-growing tree species, and sustainable use of biomass residues, some already available, can reduce GHG emissions. Outcomes are site-specific and rely on efficient integrated biomass to bioenergy systems, and sustainable land use management and governance. In some regions, specific bioenergy options, such as improved cookstoves, and small-scale biogas and biopower production, could reduce GHG emissions and improve livelihoods and health in the context of sustainable development. Medium evidence, medium agreement, 11.13. Policies governing practices in agriculture and in forest conservation and management need to account for both mitigation and adaptation. One of the most visible current policies in the AFOLU sector is the implementation of REDD+C and XI. That can represent a cost-effective option for mitigation. Limited evidence, medium agreement, 11.10, with the economic, social, and other environmental co-benefits, e.g., Conservation of biodiversity and water resources. 12:59 p.m. Library. Button.
Thus
Books.
ends
Library. 10 Industry. Page 1 of
executive
6. 2 Integrated Risk.
Chapter
3.
11.
4 Sustainable Development. Toolbar.
But before we start
Page
with chapter
5 of
4,
68.
don't
App
ask me what the
switcher.
order.
Dot. Safari.
There's a couple-
Files.
There's a couple more
Figure
figures
underscore.
left.
Figure underscore. Files. Done. Button. Done. List. Figure underscore 11.22.
22.
List.
Okay.
Button. Figure underscore 4. Rows 12. Rows 20. Rows 30. Figure underscore 11.3. Figure underscore 11.22. Figure underscore 11.23. Done. Button.
There we go.
Figure underscore 11.23. A screenshot of a graph with text and numbers.
Awesome. Graphs with text and numbers. I remember what those look like.
Done. List. Button. Figure
look
underscore
cool.
2. Figure underscore rows 12. Rows 20. Figure underscore 9.1. Figure
Problem with
underscore
graphs, of course, is
figure underscore 10.2.
visual
Figure
interpretation.
underscore 11.2. PNG. Figure underscore 11.22. Figure underscore 11.24. PNG image
Which
3.
means there's
Done.
usually some
Button.
level of judgment based on the viewer, that you.
Figure underscore 11.24. A screenshot of a chart with text and numbers.
But you know what? It gives you something to look at. Yeah, and pause the video, see something useful. Don't spend most of your day there. You know what? Spend as much of the day as you want there.
App
Who am I
switcher.
to judge?
Safari. Books.
Books.
Active. Book. Books. Page 5 of 60. Page. Since the first Chapter 4. Sustainable Development and Equity. Chapter Sustainable Development and Equity.
That's the name of chapter 4.
Executive Sum. Since the first assessment report, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, has considered issues of sustainable development (SD) and equity, acknowledging the importance to climate decision-making, and progressively expanding the scope to include the co-benefits of climate actions for SD and equity, the relevance of lifestyle and behavior, the relevance of technological choices, the relevance of procedural equity to effective decision-making, and the relevance of ethical frameworks and equitable burden sharing in assessing climate responses. This assessment report further explores key dimensions of SD and equity, highlighting the significance of disparities across different regions and groups, and the ways in which designing a climate policy is a component of a wide-ranging societal choice of a development path. Section 4.1, 4.2. Sustainable development, a central framing issue in this assessment report, is intimately connected to climate change. High confidence. SD is variably conceived as development that preserves the interests of future generations, that preserves the ecosystem services on which continued human flourishing depends, or that harmonizes the co-evolution of three pillars: economic, social, environmental. 4.2. First, the climate threat constrains possible development paths, and sufficiently disruptive climate change could preclude any prospect for a sustainable future. Medium evidence. High agreement. Thus, a stable climate is one component of SD. Second, there are synergies and trade-offs between climate responses and broader SD goals, because some climate responses generate co-benefits for human and economic development, while others can have adverse side effects and generate risks. Robust evidence. High agreement. These co-benefits and risks are studied in the sector chapters of this report, along with measures and strategies to optimize them. Options for equitable burden sharing can reduce the potential for the costs of climate action to constrain development. Medium evidence. High agreement. Third, at a more fundamental level, the capacities underlying an effective climate response overlap strongly with capacities for SD. Medium evidence. High agreement, and designing an effective climate policy involves mainstream climate in the design of comprehensive SD strategies and thinking through the general orientation of development. Medium evidence. Medium agreement. 4.2, 4.5. Equity is an integral dimension of SD, high confidence. First, intergenerational equity underlies the concept of sustainability. Intragenerational equity is also often considered an intrinsic component of SD. In the particular context of international climate policy discussions, several arguments support giving equity an important role, a moral justification that draws upon ethical principles, a legal justification that appeals to existing treaty commitments and soft law agreements to cooperate on the basis of stated equity principles, and an effectiveness justification that argues that a fair arrangement is more likely to be agreed internationally and successfully implemented domestically. Medium evidence, medium agreement. A relatively small set of core equity principles serve as the basis for most discussions of equitable burden sharing in a climate regime: responsibility for GHG emissions, capacity, ability to pay for mitigation, but sometimes other dimensions of mitigative capacity. The right to development, and equality, often interpreted as an equal entitlement to emit. 4.2, 4.6. While it is possible to envision an evolution toward equitable and sustainable development, its underlying determinants are also deeply embedded in existing societal patterns that are unsustainable and highly inertial. High confidence. A useful set of determinants from which to examine the prospects for and impediments to SD and equity are the legacy of development relations, governance and political economy, population and demography, values and behavior, human and social capital, technology, natural resource endowments, and finance and investment. The evolution of each of these determinants as a driver, rather than barrier to a SD transition is conceivable, but also poses profound challenges. Medium evidence, medium agreement. 4.3. Governing a transition toward an effective climate response and SD pathway is a challenge involving rethinking our relation to nature, accounting for multiple generations and interests, including those based on endowments in natural resources. Overlapping environmental issues, among actors with widely unequal capacities, resources, and political power, and divergent conceptions of justice. High confidence. Key debated issues include articulating top-down and bottom-up approaches, engaging participation of diverse countries and actors, creating procedurally equitable forms of decentralization and combining market mechanisms with government action, all in a particular political-economic context. Robust evidence, high agreement. 4.3. Technology and finance both are strong determinants of future societal paths, and while society's current systems of allocating resources and prioritizing efforts toward investment and innovation are in many ways robust and dynamic, there are also some fundamental tensions with the underlying objectives of SD, high confidence. First, the technological innovation and financial systems are highly responsive to short-term motivations, and are sensitive to broader social and environmental costs and benefits only to the, often limited, extent that these costs and benefits are internalized by regulation, taxation, laws and social norms. Second, while these systems are quite responsive to market demand that is supported by purchasing power, they are only indirectly responsive to needs, particularly of those of the world's poor. And they operate with a time horizon that disregards potential needs of future generations. Medium evidence, medium agreement. 4.3. Enhancing human capital based on individual knowledge and skills, and social capital based on mutually beneficial formal and informal relationships is important for facilitating a transition towards sustainable development. Medium evidence, high agreement. Social dilemmas arise in which short-term individual. 4. 287. 4. Interests conflict with long-term social interests, with altruistic values being favorable to SD. However, the formation of values and their translation into behaviors is mediated by many factors, including the available set of market choices and lifestyles, the tenor of dominant information sources, including advertisements and popular culture, the culture and priorities of formal and civil institutions, and prevailing governance mode. Medium evidence, medium agreement. The demographic transition toward low fertility rates is usually viewed favorably, Though an aging population creates economic and social challenges, and migrations due to climate impacts may exacerbate tensions, medium evidence. Medium agreement, 4.3, 4.4. App switcher. Safari, files, files, done, button.
Oh, why? Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Wow, applause. In any event.
Figure underscore 11.20, done, list, button.
Let's be honest.
Figure underscore 3, rows 12 to 20, rows 20, figure underscore 8.13, PNG, rows 12, figure underscore 6.2, PNG, rows 1 to, figure underscore 3.1, figure underscore 3.3, figure underscore 4.2, figure underscore 4. Done, button.
As you could see in that list.
Figure underscore 4.1, a blue pie chart with black text on a white background.
Ooh,
possible text. Looking at only mitigation.
I like pie.
Done. List. Button. Figure underscore 3.3. Figure underscore 4.3. P. Figure underscore 4. Done.
If you're
button.
Watching, you'll see that there's only 3 figures in this chapter.
Figure underscore 4.2. A graph with red lines and text. Possible text. Unsustainable.
I like
sustainable.
Oh, well, that's ominous. Unsustainable.
Done. List. Button. Figure underscore 4.1. Figure underscore 4.3. Figure underscore 5. Figure underscore 4.3. Done. Button.
Again and again, of course. Pause the video. Have a look if it interests you.
Figure underscore 4.3. A screenshot of a flowchart with text and arrows. Possible text. Human environmental. Development conservation. Design.
Ooh.
Strategy development.
Look at that.
Implementation.
All right, that's enough.
Path followed sustainable. App switch. Safari. Books. Active. Books. Books. Interests. 4. Interests conflict. The global consumption of goods and services has increased dramatically over the last decades, in both absolute and per capita terms, and is a key driver of environmental degradation, including global warming. High confidence. This trend involves the spread of high consumption lifestyles in some countries and sub-regions, while in other parts of the world large populations continue to live in poverty. There are high disparities in consumption both between and within countries. Robust evidence. High agreement. 4.4.
Oh, sure. Stop while I'm having a drink.
2 basic types of decoupling are often invoked in the context of a transition towards sustainable development: the decoupling of material resource consumption, including fossil fuels and environmental impact, including climate change, from economic growth, and the decoupling of economic growth from human well-being. High confidence. The first type, the dematerialization of the economy, i.e., of consumption and production, is generally considered crucial for meeting SD and equity goals, including mitigation of climate change. Production-based, territorial, accounting suggests that some decoupling of impacts from economic growth has occurred, especially in industrialized countries, but its extent is significantly diminished based on a consumption-based accounting. Robust evidence. Medium agreement. Consumption-based emissions are more strongly associated with gross domestic product, GDP, than production-based emissions, because wealthier countries generally satisfy a higher share of their final consumption of products through net imports compared to poorer countries. Ultimately, absolute levels of resource use and environmental impact, including GHG emissions, generally continue to rise with GDP. Robust evidence. High agreement, though great variations between countries highlight the importance of other factors such as geography, energy system, production methods, waste management, household size, diet and lifestyle. The second type of decoupling, of human well-being from economic growth, is a more controversial goal than the first. There are ethical controversies about the measure of well-being and the use of subjective data for this purpose. Robust evidence. Medium agreement. There are also empirical controversies about the relationship between subjective well-being and income, with some recent studies across countries finding a clear relationship between average levels of life satisfaction and per capita income. While the evidence about the long-term relationship between satisfaction and income is less conclusive and quite diverse among countries, medium evidence, medium agreement. Studies of emotional well-being do identify clear satiation points beyond which further increases in income no longer enhance emotional well-being. Medium evidence, medium agreement. Furthermore, income inequality has been found to have a marked negative effect on average subjective well-being, due to perceived unfairness and undermined trust of institutions among low-income groups. Medium evidence, medium agreement. 4.4. Understanding the impact of development paths on emissions and mitigative capacity, and, more generally, how development paths can be made more sustainable and more equitable in the future requires in-depth analysis of the mechanisms that underpin these paths. High confidence. Of particular importance are the processes that may generate path dependence and lock-ins, notably increasing returns but also use of scarce resources, switching costs, negative externalities or complementarities between outcomes. Robust evidence, high agreement. 4.5, 4.6. The study of transitions between pathways is an emerging field, notably in the context of technology transitions. Yet analyzing how to transition to a sustainable, low-emission pathway remains a major scientific challenge. It would be aided by models with a holistic framework encompassing the economy, society, in particular the distribution of resources and well-being, and the environment, that take account of relevant technical constraints and trends, and explore a long-term horizon while simultaneously capturing processes relevant for the short term and the key uncertainties. Medium evidence, medium agreement. 4.5, 4.7. Mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation and adaptation measures can strongly affect broader SD and equity objectives, and it is thus useful to understand their broader implications. High confidence. Building both mitigative capacity and adaptive capacity relies to a profound extent on the same factors as those that are integral to equitable and sustainable development. Medium evidence, high agreement, and equitable burden sharing can enhance these capacities where they are most fragile. 4.6. This chapter focuses on examining ways in which the broader objectives of equitable and sustainable development provide a policy frame for an effective, robust, and long-term response to the climate problem. 4.8.
Okie doke.
117p. Library. Button.
So because these
Books.
chapters
Library.
are
Back
shorter
button. 2. Integrated
in this
risk and
section,
uncertainty. Page 2. Page 3 of
I'm
6.
including
14. Regional
a
development.
separate section here,
New. Annex 2 metrics.
which I
Annex
just
3
thought would be
technology
interesting.
specific toolbar.
So
Page
this is
3 of 28. The nature and mitigation potentials are approached via product-specific or service-specific emission intensities, i.e., emissions per unit of useful outputs, which are as diverse as electricity, steel, and cattle meat. Mitigation potentials on a product/service level can be understood as the potential reduction in specific emissions that can result from actions such as switching to production processes that cause lower emissions for otherwise comparable products and reducing production/consumption of emission-intensive products.
so there.
Annex 3. Technology-specific cost and performance parameters.
Technology-specific cost and
Toolbar.
performance
Page
parameters. So
chooser.
in those areas,
Page chooser. Page 3. Page 6. Page
so I'm going
7.
to show you these. These
For
are
a
more
comprehensive
useful to those who can
Annex
see.
3 Technology-specific cost and performance parameters Table A. 3.
Here's an
2
example.
vertical line emissions of selected electricity supply technologies, GCO2X/kWh, I. Options.
So-
Annex 3 Technology-specific cost and performance parameters Table A. 3. 2 vertical line emissions of selected electricity supply technologies, GCO2X/kWh, I.
So there's, I'm going up to page 25. I'm just going to skip through, leave each one for about 3 seconds. So if you want to stop it and look at it, you can. As for accessing this With audio, I'm afraid I'm not really sure how that might be possible, but this is Annex 3. As you heard the name of this particular chart, you can decide if this might have things that are interesting. There's also charts I know on different types of fossil fuel, energy out, and infrastructures and lots of other things. And anyway, here we go.
Toolbar. Page chooser. Page 7. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. Page 11. Page 12. Page 13. Page 14. Page 15. Page 16. Page 17. Page 18. Page 19. Page 20. Page 21. Page 22. Page 23. Page 24. Page 25.
Thank you, Oscar. Oscar and his trio. Any event?
App switcher.
Oh, nope.
Book. Safari.
Sorry.
Safari. Files.
Nope.
Books.
I want to stay in
Active
books.
books. Version of the books.
So that's
Page.
Annex 3.
25. Library. Button. Library. New. Page 3 of 10. Industry. Unknown author.
And I'm not trying to be
8%.
mysterious about my choice
Toolbar.
of the order of
Page-
these. I was trying to alternate, as I
Page
said before,
5
between
of
more
72.
concrete and less and more abstract, and also fit them all together based on page length. So this just happened to have shorter chapters, which is why I was able to add in that other thing.
Page 5 of 7. Industry. Chapter 10. Industry. Industry.
So industry is just the name. That's the name of the chapter. One word. Chapter 10.
Executives. An absolute reduction in emissions from the industry sector will require deployment of a broad set of mitigation options beyond energy efficiency measures, medium evidence, high agreement. In the last 2 to 3 decades there has been continued improvement in energy and process efficiency in industry, driven by the relatively high share of energy costs. In addition to energy efficiency, other strategies such as emissions efficiency, including e.g. fuel and feedstock switching, carbon dioxide capture and storage, CCS, material use efficiency, e.g. less scrap, new product design, recycling and reuse of materials and products, product service efficiency, e.g. car sharing, maintaining buildings for longer life for products, or demand reductions, e.g. less mobility services, less product demand, are required in parallel, medium evidence, high agreement, section 10.4, 10.7. Industry-related greenhouse gas, GHG, emissions have continued to increase and are higher than GHG emissions from other end-use sectors, high confidence. Despite the declining share of industry in global gross domestic product, GDP, global industry and waste. Water GHG emissions grew from 10.4 gigaton CO2 equivalent in 1990 to 13.0 gigaton CO2 equivalent in 2005 to 15.4 gigaton CO2 equivalent in 2010. Total global GHG emissions for industry and wastewater in 2010, which nearly doubled since 1970, were comprised of direct energy-related CO2 emissions of 5.3 gigaton CO2 equivalent. Indirect CO2 emissions from production of electricity and heat for industry of 5.2 gigaton CO2 equivalent, process CO2 emissions of 2.6 gigaton CO2 equivalent, non-CO2 GHG emissions of 0.9 gigaton CO2 equivalent, and wastewater emissions of 1.4 gigaton CO2 equivalent. 2010 direct and indirect emissions were dominated by CO2, 85.1%, followed by CH4, 8.6%, HFC, 3.5%, N2O, 2.0%, PFC, 0.5%, and SF6, 0.4%, emissions. Currently, emissions from industry are larger than the emissions from either the buildings or transport end-use sectors and represent just over 30% of global GHG emissions in 2010, just over 40% if agriculture, forestry, and other land use, emissions are not included. High confidence, 10.2, 10.3. Globally, industrial GHG emissions are dominated by the Asia region, which was also the region with the fastest emission growth between 2005 and 2010, high confidence. In 2010, over half, 52%, of global direct GHG emissions from industry and wastewater were from the Asia region, Asia, followed by the member countries of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development in 1990, OECD 1990, 25%, economies in transition EAT, 9%, Middle East and Africa, MAF, 8%, and Latin America, LAM, 6%. Between 2005 and 2010, GHG emissions from industry grew at an average annual rate of 3.5% globally, comprised of 7% average annual growth in the Asia region, followed by MAF, 4.4%, LAM, 2%, and the EAT countries, 0.1%, but declined in the OECD 1990 countries, minus 1.1%, 10.3%. The energy intensity of the sector could be reduced by approximately up to 25% compared to current level through wide-scale upgrading, replacement and deployment of best available technologies, particularly in countries where these are not in practice, and for non-energy intensive industries, robust evidence, high agreement. Despite long-standing attention to energy efficiency in industry, many options for improved energy efficiency remain. 10.4, 10.7. Through innovation, additional reductions of approximately up to 20% in energy intensity may potentially be realized before approaching technological limits in some energy-intensive industries. Limited evidence, medium agreement. Barriers to implementing energy efficiency relate largely to the initial investment costs and lack of information. Information programs are the most prevalent approach for promoting energy efficiency, followed by economic instruments, regulatory approaches, and voluntary actions. 10.4, 10.7, 10.9, 10.11. Besides sector-specific technologies, cross-cutting technologies and measures applicable in both large energy-intensive industries and small and medium enterprises, SMEs, can help to reduce GHG emissions. Robust evidence, high agreement. Cross-cutting technologies such as efficient motors, electronic control systems, and cross-cutting measures such as reducing air or steam leaks help to optimize performance of industrial processes and improve plant efficiency cost effectively with both energy savings and emissions benefits. 10.4. Long-term step change options can include a shift to low-carbon electricity, radical product innovations, alternatives to cement, or carbon dioxide capture and storage, CCS, once demonstrated, sufficiently tested, cost-effective, and publicly accepted. These options may contribute to significant climate change mitigation in the future. Medium evidence, medium agreement. 10.4. The level of demand for new and replacement products has a significant effect on the activity level and resulting GHG emissions in the industry sector. Medium evidence, high agreement. Extending product life and using products more intensively could contribute to reduction of product demand without reducing the service. Absolute emission reductions can also come through changes in lifestyle and their corresponding demand levels, be it directly, e.g., for food, textiles, or indirectly, e.g., for product/service demand related to tourism. 10.4. Mitigation activities in other sectors and adaptation measures may result in increased industrial product demand and corresponding emissions. Robust evidence, high agreement. Production of mitigation technologies, e.g., insulation materials for buildings, or material demand for adaptation measures, e.g., infrastructure materials, contribute to industrial GHG emissions. 10.4, 10.6. Systemic approaches and collaboration within and across industrial sectors at different levels, sharing of infrastructure, information, waste and waste management facilities, heating. 10. 743. 10. And cooling, may provide may provide further mitigation potential in certain regions or industry types. Robust evidence, high agreement. The formation of industrial clusters, industrial parks, and industrial symbiosis are emerging trends in many developing countries, especially with SMEs. 10.5.
You don't say.
App switcher. Safari. Files. Figure done. List. Button.
Okay.
Figure underscore 3.
Help me with
Rows
this,
12 to rows
Tell me when to
20.
stop.
Figure underscore 9.1.
Oh, very good, thank you.
Figure underscore 9 dot. Figure underscore 9 dot. Figure underscore 9 dot 20. Figure underscore
Alright.
10.1. PNG image
Apparently the
done.
6 figures in
Button.
chapter 9.
Figure underscore 10.1. A photo containing a diagram. Possible text. Service sector equipment device final energy. Age heated. Shio.
Service sector equivalent. See, that's the type of thing.
Done.
Anyway.
List. Button. Figure underscore 10.1. Figure underscore 10. Rows 40. Figure underscore 12.20. Figure underscore 11.
Too far.
Figure underscore 11. Figure underscore 9.20. Figure underscore 10.2. PNG image 100. Done. Button. Figure underscore 10.2. A photo containing a diagram.
Again. Now, if you didn't take a break last time, I really must insist. I'm not really sure how I'm going to insist, given that I'm here and you're there.
App switcher.
Whenever.
File. Safari.
And whenever.
Tyrrell music. Books.
And
Active.
wherever.
Safari.
There is.
Books. Active. Books.
But,
Books.
you know, you
Page.
need to take a break
6 of
once in a while.
72.
Hope you took a break with that visual.
Toolbar. Several emission 10 and cooling. Several emission reducing options in the industrial sector are cost effective and profitable. Medium evidence. Medium agreement. While options in cost ranges of 20-50, 0-20, and even below $0 2010/TCO2 exist, to achieve near zero emission intensity levels in the industry sector would require additional realization of long-term step change options, e.g. CCS associated with higher levelized costs of conserved carbon, LCCC, in the range of $5,150 2010/TCO2. However, mitigation costs vary regionally and depend on site-specific conditions. Similar estimates of costs for implementing material efficiency, product service efficiency, and service demand reduction strategies are not available. 10.7. Mitigation measures in the industry sector are often associated with co-benefits, robust evidence, high agreement. Co-benefits of mitigation measures could drive industrial decisions and policy choices. They include enhanced competitiveness through cost reductions, new business opportunities, better environmental compliance, health benefits through better local air and water quality and better work conditions, and reduced waste. All of which provide multiple indirect private and social benefits. 10.8. Unless barriers to mitigation in industry are resolved, the pace and extent of mitigation in industry will be limited and even profitable measures will remain untapped. Robust evidence, high agreement. There are a broad variety of barriers to implementing energy efficiency in the industry sector. For energy-intensive industry, the issue is largely initial investment costs for retrofits. While barriers for other industries include both cost and a lack of information. For material efficiency, product service efficiency, and demand reduction, there is a lack of experience with implementation of mitigation measures and often there are no clear incentives for either the supplier or consumer. Barriers to material efficiency include lack of human and institutional capacities to encourage management decisions and public participation. 10.9. There is no single policy that can address the full range of mitigation measures available for industry and overcome associated barriers. Robust evidence, high agreement. In promoting energy efficiency, information programs are the most prevalent approach, followed by economic instruments, regulatory approaches and voluntary actions. To date, few policies have specifically pursued material or product service efficiency. 10.11. While the largest mitigation potential in industry lies in reducing CO2 emissions from fossil fuel use, There are also significant mitigation opportunities for non-CO2 gases. Key opportunities comprise, for example, reduction of HFC emissions by leak repair, refrigerant recovery and recycling, and proper disposal and replacement by alternative refrigerants, ammonia, HC, CO2, nitrous oxide, N2O. Emissions from adipic and nitric acid production can be reduced through the implementation of thermal destruction and secondary catalysts. The reduction of non-CO2 GHGs also faces numerous barriers. Lack of awareness, lack of economic incentives, and lack of commercially available technologies, e.g., for HFC recycling and incineration, are typical examples, 10.4, 10.7, 10.9. Long-term scenarios for industry highlight improvements in emissions efficiency as an important future mitigation strategy, robust evidence, high agreement. Detailed industry sector scenarios fall within the range of more general long-term integrated scenarios. Improvements in emissions efficiency in the mitigation scenarios result from a shift from fossil fuels to electricity with low, or negative, CO2 emissions and use of CCS for industry fossil fuel use and process emissions. The crude representation of materials, products, and demand in scenarios limits the evaluation of the relative importance of material efficiency, product service efficiency, and demand reduction options. Robust evidence. High agreement, 6.8, 10.10. The most effective option for mitigation in waste management is waste reduction, followed by reuse and recycling and energy recovery. Robust evidence, high agreement, 10.4, 10.14. Direct emissions from the waste sector almost doubled during the period from 1970 to 2010. Globally, approximately only 20% of municipal solid waste, MSW, is recycled and approximately 13.5% is treated with energy recovery while the rest is deposited in open dump sites or landfills. Approximately 47% of wastewater produced in the domestic and manufacturing sectors is still untreated. As the share of recycled or reused material is still low, waste treatment technologies and energy recovery can also result in significant emission reductions from waste disposal. Reducing emissions from landfilling through treatment of waste by anaerobic digestion has the largest cost range, going from negative cost to very high cost. Also, advanced wastewater treatment technologies may enhance GHG emissions reduction in the wastewater treatment, but they tend to concentrate in the higher costs options. Medium evidence, medium agreement, 10.14. A key challenge for the industry sector is the uncertainty, incompleteness, and quality of data available in the public domain on energy use and costs for specific technologies on global and regional scales that can serve as a basis for assessing performance, mitigation potential, costs, and for developing policies and programs with high confidence bottom-up information on cross-sector collaboration and demand reduction as well as their implications for mitigation in industry is particularly limited. Improved modeling of material flows in integrated models could lead to a better understanding of material efficiency and demand reduction strategies and the associated mitigation potentials. 10.12.
In theory, anyway.
Library. Button. Lib. 10 Industry. On page 1 of 2 Integrated. 3, 4, 5 Drivers. Trends.
Drivers,
Toolbar.
not as in car, but as in
page 4 of 62.
drivers of
App Switcher.
actions.
Safari.
In any event,
TyrrellMuseum.com and 3 other. Safari.
Since you're pushing back
Skip
on
to main
taking a break
content.
during
In
the
page link.
images, we're gonna
Actions
take a commercial
available.
break.
Black_beauty. Page 2 of 6.
This is
Page 1 of 6.
the webpage for the Royal Tyrrell Museum of Paleontology. I first brought it up during part A. Showed you my sweatshirt. I was very proud. My daughter, who is even more of a geek than I am, was so excited when she saw this on this presentation. It's delightful. Anyway, I'm not going to go on again about
page 2 of
the
6.
museum itself because I already gushed about it in the first one. I'm going on about their website here.
Playlist,
What they've
where you
done
can
is
watch
because,
presentations
of
on
course,
research and
museums
hot
are opening
topics
and
in
closing
paleontology by world-renowned
cuckoo clocks these days.
scientists.
What was it saying?
Playlist, where you can watch presentations on research and hot topics in paleontology by world-renowned scientists.
There you go. So they've set up, it's called the Royal Tyrrell from Home or something?
Speaker series, link is external. You might also be interested. Playlist on YouTube. RTMP from home, link is external.
There we go,
link.
RTMP from home.
Check out our playlist RTM playlist. So you might also lectures. Be interested in up speaker series, play online jigsaw puzzle. Heading, try your hand at reassembling Giganotosaurus skull. Gigantosaurus. Do the zoom backgrounds. Heading zoom level backgrounds.
3. I want to try that one.
Looking Cretaceous it, Alberta. Gallery T. Reg. Specimen. Aura. Gorg. In a period. To apply your new Zoom's official guide. 1. 2. Open. Select virtual background and then choose the plus icon to page 4 of download. Dinosaur_hall. Down coloring pages. Heading level 3.
You can print out gift cards. Gift cards like Christmas cards. They apparently have a sloth-like Christmas relevant to the giant sloth, which is on here somewhere.
Page 5 of 6. Page 6. Google Map link. Page 5 of Triceratops link.
Royal Tyrrell Museum in Drumheller, Alberta. One of the more amazing things that Alberta's come up with. Thank heavens.
Page 3 of 6. Looking for a cool background for your next Zoom meeting. Yeah, page 1 of 6. Black_beauty. Image. And article. Cenozoic gallery. Link. Black_beauty. Image. Article. Landmark. A group of blue text on a white background. Separator. All ages. Cenozoic gallery. Link.
Sure,
End. Skip to main content. Link. During the Cenozoic era, the age of mammals, continents drifted into positions that are relatively familiar today. Mountain chains began to emerge, and plants and animals became increasingly recognizable. Although mammals appeared at the same time as dinosaurs, they were initially very small. Following the mass extinction 66 million years ago, in which all non-avian dinosaurs perished, mammal populations increased and expanded into empty ecological niches. Article. Landmark.
Wow, thank heavens for extinctions, eh?
Menu.
Anyway,
link. Navigation. Landmark. App switcher. Files.
Back
books.
to work.
Active. Books. Cumulative books. Cumulative. 5. Executive summary. 5.
Chapter 5 is...
Chapter 5 analyzes the anthropogenic. Executive summary. 5. Bookmarked. Search. Appearance. Markup. 5 drivers. Trends and mitigation. Heading.
There you go. Drivers and trends in mitigation.
Markup. Appearance. Search. Bookmark. 5. Execute. Chapter 5 analyzes the anthropogenic greenhouse gas, GHG, emission trends until the present and the main drivers that explain those trends. The chapter uses different perspectives to analyze past GHG emissions trends, including aggregate emissions flows and per capita emissions, cumulative emissions, sectoral emissions, and territory-based versus consumption-based emissions. In all cases, global and regional trends are analyzed. Where appropriate, the emission trends are contextualized with long-term historic developments in GHG emissions extending back to 1750. GHG emissions trends. Anthropogenic GHG emissions have increased from 27, plus or minus 32, to 49, plus or minus 45, gigaton CO2 equivalent/year, plus 80% between 1970 and 2010. GHG emissions during the last decade of this period were the highest in human history. High confidence. 1 GHG emissions grew on average by 1 gigaton CO2 equivalent, 2.2%, per year between 2000 and 2010, compared to 0.4 gigaton CO2 equivalent, 1.3%, per year between 1970 and 2000, sec. T on 5, 2, 1. CO2 emissions from fossil fuel combustion and industrial processes contributed about 78% of the total GHG emission increase from 1970 to 2010, with similar percentage contribution for the period 2000 to 2010. High confidence. Fossil fuel-related CO2 emissions for energy purposes increased consistently over the last 40 years, reaching 32, plus or minus 2.7, gigaton CO2/year. or 69% of global GHG emissions in 2010. They grew further by about 3% between 2010 and 2011 and by about 1-2% between 2011 and 2012. Agriculture, deforestation, and other land use changes have been the second largest contributors whose emissions, including other GHGs, have reached 12 gigaton CO2 equivalent/year. Low confidence. 24% of global GHG emissions in 2010. Since 1970, CO2 emissions increased by about 90%, and methane, CH4, and nitrous oxide, N2O, increased by about 47% and 43%, respectively. Fluorinated gases, F-gases, emitted in industrial processes continue to represent less than 2% of anthropogenic GHG emissions. Of the 49, plus or minus 4.5, gigaton CO2 equivalent/year, in total anthropogenic GHG emissions in 2010, CO2 remains the major anthropogenic GHG, accounting for 76%, 38 plus or minus 3.8 gigaton CO2 equivalent/year, of total anthropogenic GHG emissions in 2010, 16%. 7.8 plus or minus 1.6 gigaton CO2 equivalent/year, come from methane, CH4, 6.2%, 3.1 plus or minus 1.9 gigaton CO2 equivalent/year, from nitrous oxide, N2O, and 2.0%, 1.0 plus or minus 0.2 gigaton CO2 equivalent/year, from fluorinated gases, 5, 2, 1. Over the last 4 decades, GHG emissions have risen in every region other than economies in transition, though trends in the different regions have been dissimilar. High confidence. In Asia, GHG emissions grew by 330%, reaching 19 gigaton CO2 equivalent/year in. Values with plus or minus provide uncertainty ranges for a 90% confidence interval, 2 unless stated otherwise. All emission shares are calculated based on global warming potential with a 100-year time horizon. See also section 3, 9, 6 for more information on emission metrics. 2010, in Middle East and Africa, MAF, by 70%, in Latin America, LAM, by 57%, in the group of member countries of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development OECD 1990, by 22%. And in economies in transition EAT, by 4%. 3. Although small in absolute terms, GHG emissions from international transportation are growing rapidly. 5, 2, 1. Cumulative fossil CO2 emissions, since 1750, more than tripled from 420 gigaton CO2 by 1970 to 1,300 gigaton CO2, plus or minus 8%, by 2010. High confidence. Cumulative CO2 emissions associated with agriculture, deforestation, and other land use change, AFOLU, have increased from about 490 gigaton CO2 in 1970 to approximately 680 gigaton CO2, plus or minus 45%, in 2010. Considering cumulative CO2 emissions from 1750 to 2010, the OECD 1990 region continues to be the major contributor with 42%. Asia with 22% is increasing its share. 5, 2, 1. In 2010, median per capita emissions for the group of high-income countries, 13 TCO2x/cap, is almost 10 times that of low-income countries, 14 TCO2x/cap. Robust evidence, high agreement. Global average per capita GHG emissions have shown a stable trend over the last 40 years. This global average, however, masks the divergence that exists at the regional level. In 2010, per capita GHG emissions in OECD 1990 and EAT are between 1.9 and 2.7 times higher than per capita GHG emissions in LAM, MAF, and Asia. While per capita GHG emissions in LAM and MAF have been stable over the last 4 decades, in Asia they have increased by more than 120%. 5, 2, 1. The energy and industry sectors in upper middle income countries accounted for 60% of the rise in global GHG emissions between 2000 and 2010. High confidence. From 2000 to 2010, GHG emissions grew in all sectors, except in AFOLU where positive and negative emission changes are reported across different databases and uncertainties in the data are high. Energy supply, plus 36%. To 17 gigaton CO2 equivalent/year. Industry, plus 39%. To 10 gigaton CO2 equivalent/year. Transport, plus 18%. To 7.0 gigaton CO2 equivalent/year. Buildings, plus 9%. To 3.2 gigaton CO2 equivalent/year. AFOLU, plus 8%. To 12 gigaton CO2 equivalent/year. For waste GHG emissions increased substantially but remained close to 3% of global GHG emissions. 5, 3, 4, 5, 3, 5. In the OECD 1990 region, territorial CO2 emissions slightly decreased between 2000 and 2010, but consumption-based CO2 emissions increased by 5%. Robust evidence, high agreement. In most developed countries, both consumption-related emissions and GDP are growing. There is an emerging gap between territorial drivers. Chapter 1, 3. For these numbers, the country. For these numbers of toolbar. Page 5. The decreasing reduction per capita reduction per GH. The trend production-related emissions and consumption-related emissions that include CO2 embedded in trade flows. The gap shows that a considerable share of CO2 emissions from fossil fuels combustion in developing countries is released in the production of goods exported to developed countries. By 2010, however, the developing country group has overtaken the developed country group in terms of annual CO2 emissions from fossil fuel combustion and industrial processes from both production and consumption perspectives. 5, 3, 3.
So you'll have to excuse me.
App switcher, books, doc, book, Safari, files, figure under files, done,
which is why I have to keep doing things.
Figure under done, button, list, button. Figure underscore 3.2, PNG image, rows 12, figure underscore 5.22. Figure underscore 4.3, figure underscore 4. Figure underscore 5.1, PNG image 2, done, button.
It's the home stretch though.
Figure underscore 5.1, a multicolored pie chart on a beige surface.
Ooh, multicolored pie. Raspberry,
done, button,
rhubarb
list, button.
Yum.
Figure underscore, row 60, figure underscore 7.1. Figure underscore 6. Figure underscore 5.2, PNG image 2, done, button. Figure underscore 5.2, a photo containing a diagram. App switcher, Safari, books, active, books. Book. The trend of the trend of increasing fossil CO2 emissions is robust. Very high confidence. 5 different fossil fuel CO2 emissions datasets, harmonized to cover fossil fuel, cement, bunker fuels, and gas flaring, show plus or minus 4% differences over the last 3 decades. Uncertainties associated with estimates of historic anthropogenic GHG emissions vary by type of gas and decrease with the level of aggregation. Global CO2 emissions from fossil fuels have relatively low uncertainty, assessed to be plus or minus 8%. Uncertainty in fossil CO2 emissions at the country level reaches up to 50%. 5, 2, 1, 5, 2, 3. GHG emissions drivers. Per capita production and consumption growth is a major driver for worldwide increasing GHG emissions. Robust evidence, high agreement. Global average economic growth, as measured through GDP per capita, grew by 100%, from 4,800 to 9,800 in $2005/cap year between 1970 and 2010, outpacing GHG intensity improvements. At regional level, however, there are large variations. Although different in absolute values, OECD 1990 and LAM showed a stable growth in per capita income of the same order of magnitude as the GHG intensity improvements. This led to almost constant per capita emissions and an increase in total emissions at the rate of population growth. The EAT showed a decrease in income around 1990 that, together with decreasing emissions per output and a very low population growth, led to a decrease in overall emissions until 2000. The MAF showed a decrease in GDP per capita, but a high population growth rate led to an increase in overall emissions. Emerging economies in Asia showed very high economic growth rates at aggregate and per capita levels, leading to the largest growth in per capita emissions despite also having the highest emissions per output efficiency improvements. 5.3.3 Reductions in the energy intensity of economic output during the past 4 decades have not been sufficient to offset the effect of GDP growth. High confidence. Energy intensity has declined in all developed and large developing countries due mainly to technology, changes in economic structure, the mix of energy sources, and changes in the participation of inputs such as capital and labor used. At the global level, per capita primary energy consumption rose by 30% from 1970 to 2010. Due to population growth, total energy use has increased by 130% over the same period. Countries and regions with higher income per capita tend to have higher energy use per capita. Per capita energy use in the developing regions is only about 25% of that in the developed economies on average. Growth rates in energy use per capita in developing countries, however, are much higher than those in developed countries. 5.3.4 The decreasing carbon intensity of energy supply has been insufficient to offset the increase in global energy use. High confidence. Increased use of coal since 2000 has reversed the slight decarbonization trends, exacerbating the burden of energy-related GHG emissions. Estimates indicate that coal and unconventional gas and oil resources are large, suggesting that decarbonization would not be primarily driven by the exhaustion of fossil fuels, but by economics and technological and socio-political decisions. 5.3.4, 5.8 Population growth aggravates worldwide growth of GHG emissions. High confidence. Global population has increased by 87% from 1970, reaching 6.9 billion in 2010. The population has increased mainly in Asia, Latin America, and Africa, but the emissions increase for an additional person varies widely, depending on geographical location, income, lifestyle, and the available energy resources and technologies. The gap in per capita emissions between the top and bottom countries exceeds a factor of 50. The effects of demographic changes such as urbanization, aging, and household size have indirect effects on emissions and smaller than the direct effects of changes in population size. 5.3.2 Technological innovation and diffusion support overall economic growth, and also determine the energy intensity of economic output and the carbon intensity of energy. Medium confidence. At the aggregate level, between 1970 and 2010, technological change increased income and resources use, as past technological change has favored labor productivity increase over resource efficiency. 5.6.1 Innovations that potentially decrease emissions can trigger behavioral responses that diminish the potential gains from increased efficiency, a phenomenon called the rebound effect. 5.6.2 Trade facilitates the diffusion of productivity-enhancing and emissions-reducing technologies. 5.4 Infrastructural choices have long-lasting effects on emissions and may lock a country in a development path for decades. Medium evidence. Medium agreement. As an example, infrastructure and technology choices made by industrialized countries in the post-World War II period, at low energy prices, still have an effect on current worldwide GHG emissions. 5.6.3 Behavior affects emissions through energy use, technological choices, lifestyles, and consumption preferences, robust evidence, high agreement. Behavior is rooted in individual psychological, cultural, and social orientations that lead to different lifestyles and consumption patterns. Across countries, strategies and policies have been used to change individual choices, sometimes through changing the context in which decisions are made. A question remains whether such policies can be scaled up to macro level. 5.5. Co-benefits may be particularly important for policymakers because the benefits can be realized faster than can benefits from reduced climate change, but they depend on assumptions about future trends, medium evidence, high agreement. Policies. 5. 355.
Here we go. As I mentioned, a dog's breakfast. So I get nothing from this page at all.
5 drivers, share.
There's stuff there.
5 drivers, trends and mitigation.
It's still the chapter.
Heading.
In any event, congratulations, you made it through part B.
App switcher, Safari, Safari, menu, link. AR5 Climate Change 2014, Mitigation of Climate Change. Heading Level 1.
So just a reminder, again, lots of links in the comments of the YouTube channel. This is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's website specific, and this is the specific page for this report. You can download all of those chapters you kept seeing me access. Those are all downloaded from this page. They've got lots of other stuff. You can even make your own presentations. They have sections for that. And also access to all of their other reports. As I said, I'm not going to describe
A talking
this one too
game.
much. That's where you can find that stuff.
A talking game YouTube channel.
This is where you can
visited.
find me.
403. A Barefoot Freelance website. A talking game at Barefoot Freelance.
Email address there. And once again, as I've said,
Image. A white surface with light shining on it.
Last Monday of the month, we have conversations about understanding the IPCC. You're welcome to join us, and you can find this on meetup.com. And you know what? I don't think I've put a link in the comments for this, but I will this time. Thanks very much for listening, as they say, and hope February's good to you.
Screen recording in progress. Mother 5, 100%. Screen recording.